When the Zephyrian Defense Council received the distress beacon from Kepler 442b, they expected to find another extinct civilization, another species that had fallen to the relentless hunger of the Devourers. What they discovered instead would shake the very foundations of galactic understanding. For 3,000 years, the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations had retreated, planet by planet, system by system, before an enemy that consumed everything in its path. The Devourers were not mere conquerors. They were extinction incarnate, turning entire star systems into lifeless void. Every species that had ever faced them alone had perished. But on a small blue world in an unremarkable spiral arm, something impossible was happening. A young species, barely out of their home system, was not just surviving the Devourer onslaught. They were fighting back, and winning. The humans, as they called themselves, had done something no civilization in recorded history had ever managed. They had stopped the Devourers cold. More than that, they had begun to push them back, system by system, with a ferocity and tactical brilliance that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Now, as the greatest crisis in galactic history reaches its climax, these mysterious humans have emerged from the darkness between stars with an offer that will change everything. We heard you needed help. We're here to even the odds. What follows is the story of first contact, desperate alliances, and the day the galaxy learned that sometimes the youngest voices carry the strongest hearts and the deadliest weapons. Admiral Kethvar pressed his six-fingered hands against the tactical display, watching the red markers advance inexorably toward the last free worlds of the Zephyrian coalition. Each pulsing dot represented a Devourer hive ship, and there were thousands of them, stretching across a front that spanned 12 star systems. Behind them lay nothing but dead space, entire civilizations reduced to cosmic dust. "Status report," he commanded, his crystalline voice carrying the weight of 3 millennia of military tradition. Lieutenant Shalnex, her silver skin pale with stress, consulted her readings. 14 more refugee fleets have arrived in the past cycle. The Cortanian survivors, what's left of the Veltar merchant clans, and fragments of at least 9 other species. Total refugee count now exceeds 47 million souls. Kethvar's inner eyelids closed briefly. 47 million beings from across the galaxy, representing dozens of civilizations, all crowded into this remote cluster of worlds that had become the galaxy's final refuge. The irony was not lost on him. These had once been considered backwater systems, too far from the galactic core to matter. Now they were all that stood between the Devourers and the complete extinction of intelligent life. "And our defensive capabilities?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would bring no comfort. 630, 2 vessels of various classes, came the reply. The Etherean Synod has contributed their remaining dreadnoughts. The Quantum Collective has deployed their carrier groups, and the Nexari have brought their shield ships. But Admiral, Shalnex hesitated. Long-range sensors detect Devourer forces numbering in the tens of thousands. They'll be here within 10 cycles. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems and the distant vibration of refugee ships docking at the orbital platforms. Every officer present understood the mathematics of their situation. Even if every ship in their makeshift fleet fought with perfect coordination and legendary valor, they would barely delay the inevitable. Kethvar straightened, his ceremonial armor catching the blue light of the tactical displays. "Signal all fleet commanders. We'll make our stand at the Helix Nebula. The gravitational anomalies there will funnel their approach and give us..." "Admiral!" The communications officer's antenna-like appendages were vibrating with excitement. "We're receiving a transmission. Origin unknown, but it's coming from beyond the outer perimeter. Ed, put it through." The main view screen flickered, and static filled the channel before resolving into something unexpected. A bipedal figure with pale skin, dark hair, and remarkably symmetrical features. The being wore what appeared to be a military uniform of unknown design, and its eyes held an intensity that reminded Kethvar of the veteran warriors of his own species. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Federation vessel Indomitable," the figure said in perfect galactic standard, though with an unfamiliar accent. "We've been monitoring your communications and tactical situation. Admiral Kethvar, I presume?" Murmurs of confusion rippled across the bridge. Galactic Standard was a complex language that took most species decades to master, yet this unknown being spoke it with casual fluency. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Defense Council," he replied carefully. "Your species is unknown to our databases, Captain. How did you come to learn our language?" A slight smile crossed the human's face. "We're quick learners, Admiral. We've been monitoring galactic communications for the better part of 2 decades. Long enough to understand your situation and to realize that you could use some assistance." "Assistance?" Shalnax interjected. Captain, with all due respect, we're facing the greatest threat in galactic history. The Devourers have consumed entire star empires. Unless your people possess military technology far beyond anything we've encountered, I'm not sure what help you could provide. The human's smile widened slightly. Lieutenant, is it? I appreciate your directness. You're right to be skeptical. But before you dismiss us, you might want to check your long-range sensors. Specifically, the area approximately 50,000 kilometers off your port formation. Kefar gestured to his sensor operator, who immediately began running deep scans. Within moments, the officer's expression shifted from boredom to confusion, then to something approaching awe. Admiral, the operator said, his voice barely above a whisper, I'm detecting massive energy signatures, multiple contacts, but they're somehow invisible to our standard sensors. Only the deep gravitational array is picking them up. How many contacts? Kefar asked. I can't get an accurate count, sir. The gravitational distortions are too complex. But, Admiral, based on the mass readings alone, we're talking about vessels that dwarf our largest dreadnoughts. Captain Vasquez nodded approvingly. That would be the advance elements of the Third Human Fleet, Admiral. We've been shadowing your refugee convoys for the past several cycles, making sure they reached safety. We couldn't risk revealing ourselves until we were certain of your intentions. The Third Fleet? Kefvar repeated. How many fleets do your people possess? Enough, Vasquez replied simply. Admiral, I know this is overwhelming. First contact situations usually are, but we don't have time for extended diplomatic niceties. The Devourer Advance Force will reach your outer perimeter in 73 hours. We'd like to coordinate our defensive strategies. Charles next stepped forward, her scientific training overriding her shock. Captain, forgive my bluntness, but your species appears to be unknown to galactic civilization. The Devourers have been consuming worlds for millennia. How is it possible that humanity has not only survived their advance but has apparently developed the capability to fight them? The expression on Vasquez's face grew more serious. Lieutenant, our world, Earth, lies in what you probably consider an insignificant spiral arm, far from the major galactic civilization centers. When the Devourers reached our region of space 6 years ago, we had a choice, flee or fight. We chose to fight. And you survived, Kefvar said, a note of wonder creeping into his voice. We did more than survive, Vasquez replied. We learned their weaknesses, adapted our tactics, and developed weapons specifically designed to counter their advantages. Admiral, we didn't just survive the Devourer's assault, we stopped them cold. For the past 3 years, we've been systematically driving them back, liberating the worlds they had claimed. The bridge fell completely silent. The idea that any species could not only halt the Devourers but actually reverse their advance was so far beyond galactic experience that it bordered on the mythical. Prove it, Kefvar said finally. Vasquez nodded and touched something on her uniform. Admiral Martinez, please decloak the Indomitable and assume standard formation position. The space in front of the refugee fleet suddenly shimmered, and a massive vessel materialized as if emerging from nothingness itself. It was unlike anything in galactic naval architecture. Angular where most ships were curved, with weapon arrays that seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. Most striking were the scars across its hull, burn marks, impact craters, and weapon scarring that spoke of countless battles. That's impossible, breathed the sensor operator. The energy output alone, Admiral, that single vessel is generating more power than our entire defense fleet combined. The Indomitable is one of our newer Titan-class battleships, Vasquez explained. She's seen action in 47 major engagements against the Devourers. Would you like a demonstration of her capabilities? Before Kefvar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. Admiral, the sensor operator called out. Devourer scouts. 3 vessels approaching at high velocity from Vector 77 Mark IV. They must have detected our refugee formations. Kefvar felt his heart sink. Devourer scouts were virtually indestructible, designed to gather intelligence and call in the main swarm. Once they transmitted their findings, the entire Devourer fleet would adjust course and arrive days ahead of schedule. All vessels scramble interceptor squadrons, he ordered, knowing it was futile. Nothing they possessed had ever successfully engaged a Devourer scout vessel. Admiral, Vasquez interrupted calmly, with your permission, we'd like to handle this. Captain, I appreciate the offer, but Devourer scouts have energy shielding that has proven impervious to every weapon type we've ever deployed. They're faster than our interceptors, more maneuverable than our frigates, and their hulls can withstand direct hits from our most powerful. The Indomitable fired. The weapon discharge was unlike anything Kefvar had ever witnessed. Instead of the bright energy beams or explosive projectiles common to galactic warfare, the human ship unleashed something that seemed to tear reality itself. Space around the lead Devourer scout twisted and writhed, and the seemingly invincible vessel simply ceased. The second scout lasted no longer. The third actually managed to alter course before the human weapon reached it, but the strange energy seemed to bend and follow, striking the fleeing vessel and reducing it to constituent atoms. "That's not possible," Shalnex whispered. "Nothing destroys Devourer scouts. They're the most advanced vessels in known space." Vasquez shrugged. "They were tough, I'll give them that. It took us almost a year to figure out how to counter their defensive systems. But once you understand that they're using quantum field manipulation to achieve near invulnerability, developing a counter strategy becomes much more manageable." Kethvar stared at the empty space where 3 unstoppable enemy vessels had existed moments before. "Captain Vasquez, I believe we need to talk. Would you be willing to come aboard my flagship?" "I'd be honored, Admiral. But I should warn you, I'm not the one you really need to meet. Fleet Admiral Chen is coordinating the overall human response, and she's the one with authority to discuss joint operations. She's aboard the UES Unconquerable, approximately 2 light hours from here with the main fleet." "The main fleet?" Kethvar asked. Vasquez's expression became something that might have been sympathy. "Admiral, what you've seen so far is just the advance screening force. The Third Fleet has 800 vessels, but we're just one of 7 active fleets operating in this galactic region." The numbers were staggering. If this human was telling the truth, their species possessed naval resources that exceeded the combined fleets of all remaining galactic civilizations. "Captain, forgive the question, but why?" Shalnax asked. "Why would humanity risk so much to help species they've never encountered? What do you gain from intervening in our conflict?" For the first time, Vasquez's expression grew genuinely serious. "Lieutenant, where I come from, we have a saying, evil triumphs when good people do nothing. The Devourers aren't just your enemy, they're the enemy of all intelligent life. If we allow them to complete their conquest of this galaxy, eventually they'll come for us anyway. Better to stop them here, with allies, than face them alone later." She paused, looking directly at each officer on the bridge. "But more than that, our species has learned something important. The universe is a cold, hostile place. Intelligence is rare, consciousness is precious, and civilization is fragile. When we find others who value life, who create beauty, who reach for the stars despite the darkness between them, well, those are beings worth fighting alongside." Kethvar felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of warfare against the Devourers. Hope. "Captain," he said formally, "the Zephyrian Defense Council would be honored to coordinate our forces with yours. When can we meet with Fleet Admiral Chen?" "She's already en route," Vasquez replied. "She should be here within 6 hours. But Admiral, before she arrives, there's something else you need to know. We've been tracking Devourer fleet movements throughout this sector. Their main force isn't headed here." "What do you mean?" "They're using your refugee concentration as a lure. While you've been preparing defenses here, they've been massing the bulk of their forces for an assault on the galactic core worlds. Your last major population centers, your cultural heart, the birthplace of galactic civilization itself, they plan to consume it all while your defenders are trapped here protecting refugees." The implications hit Kethvar like a physical blow. The eternal libraries of Zirion, the great academies of Valnara, the Nexus Gardens of Quantum Prime, billions of souls who couldn't evacuate in time. "Exactly. But there's another possibility," Vasquez said. "We could split our forces. Some of our fleets can defend your refugees while others join you in a lightning strike against the core world assault force. It'll be risky and we'll be fighting on multiple fronts, but it's the only way to save both your people and your civilization's heritage." Shalnax was already running calculations on her tactical computer. "Captain, even with your fleet numbers, fighting on multiple fronts against Devourer swarms is strategic suicide. No civilization has ever successfully conducted simultaneous operations against them." "No civilization has ever had the advantages we possess," Vasquez countered. "Lieutenant, our weapons aren't just more powerful than yours. They're specifically designed to exploit Devourer weaknesses that your people haven't discovered yet. More importantly, we've learned how to fight them as they fight us, as a coordinated whole rather than individual battles." "How?" Kethvar asked. "Neural linking," she replied simply. "Every human ship, every human commander, every tactical decision is coordinated through quantum entanglement communication networks. We don't just fight as a fleet, we fight as a single organism with thousands of bodies. It's the only way to match their hive mind coordination." The concept was staggering. Galactic naval doctrine had always emphasized individual ship autonomy and commander independence. The idea of linking every vessel into a single command consciousness was both fascinating and terrifying. The risks, Charles next began, are considerable, Vasquez agreed. But so are the benefits. Admiral, when Fleet Admiral Chen arrives, she'll present you with detailed tactical plans. But I can tell you this much. For the first time since this war began, we have a chance to not just survive, but to actually win. To drive the Devourers back beyond the galactic rim and ensure they never return. Kethvar looked around his bridge, seeing hope beginning to replace despair in his officer's expressions. Captain Vasquez, speaking for the Zephyrian Defense Council and all the refugee fleets under our protection, we accept humanity's offer of alliance. Tell Fleet Admiral Chen that we'll be ready for whatever she has planned. Vasquez smiled, and for the first time it was an expression of genuine warmth rather than diplomatic courtesy. Admiral, you won't regret this decision. When the galaxy looks back on these events, they'll remember this as the day the tide began to turn. As the communication channel closed, Kethvar found himself staring at the tactical display with new eyes. The red markers representing the approaching Devourer forces were still there, still numerous, still deadly. But now there were other markers beginning to appear, blue ones, representing human vessels deploying throughout the system. For the first time in 3,000 years of retreat and loss, the forces of galactic civilization would not be fighting alone. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stepped onto the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship with the confident stride of someone who had spent the last 6 years fighting impossible battles and winning them. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and her eyes held the weight of countless tactical decisions that had meant the difference between life and extinction for entire worlds. Behind her walked a small entourage of human officers, each representing different aspects of the Terran Federation's military capabilities. Admiral Kethvar rose from his command chair, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the bridge's subdued lighting. Around them, officers from dozens of species watched in fascination as humanity's highest-ranking military commander prepared to address the galaxy's last free defenders. Admiral Chen, Kethvar said formally, on behalf of all the free peoples of the galaxy, I welcome you to this alliance. Your Captain Vasquez has given us hope where none existed before. Chen inclined her head respectfully. Admiral Kethvar, the honor is ours. We've monitored your tactical decisions over the past several months, and I can say without reservation that you've conducted one of the most skilled fighting retreats in military history. Keeping 47 million refugees alive while conducting a running battle across 12 star systems is a feat that deserves recognition. Respectful words, Admiral, but we've been losing this war for 3 millennia. Your people have apparently been winning it for 6 years. I confess that the strategic situation you've described seems almost too good to be true. Chen smiled grimly. I understand the skepticism, Admiral. When we first encountered the Devourers, we lost 37 colonies and 2 billion people before we even began to understand what we were fighting. But we learned, adapted, and most importantly, we refused to accept that extinction was inevitable. She gestured to one of her officers, a tall man with cybernetic implants along his jaw. Commander Jackson here leads our Xenobiology division. Commander, would you explain to our allies what we've discovered about our mutual enemy? Jackson stepped forward, activating a holographic display that materialized between the two command groups. The projection showed a detailed three-dimensional model of a Devourer bioship, its organic curves and weapon placements rendered in precise detail. Admirals, what the galaxy has been fighting isn't actually what it appears to be, Jackson began. These aren't ships in any sense that we understand the term. They're organisms, living creatures bred and shaped for specific combat roles. The Devourers themselves aren't individual beings, but rather specialized cells within a vast galactic organism. Lieutenant Charles next leaned forward, her scientific training engaged. Commander, our xenobiologists reached similar conclusions, but we were never able to exploit this knowledge tactically. That's because you were still thinking of them as ships with crews, Jackson replied. But once you understand that each vessel is essentially a single enormous organism, their weaknesses become apparent. Biological systems have limitations that mechanical ones don't share. They can be poisoned, infected, or disrupted at the cellular level. Chen picked up the explanation. Our first breakthrough came when we realized that Devourer hive ships communicate through biochemical signals transmitted via quantum fluctuations. They literally smell each other's thoughts across interstellar distances. Once we learned to jam these signals, their perfect coordination began to break down. Remarkable, breathed Dr. Vexnala, the Coalition's chief science officer, but surely they adapted to your countermeasures? They tried, Chen acknowledged. That's when we learned something else interesting about them. Unlike technological civilizations which can rapidly modify their equipment and tactics, biological entities are limited by evolutionary adaptation speeds. They simply cannot change their fundamental nature fast enough to keep up with technological countermeasures. Commander Jackson manipulated the holographic display, showing detailed internal structures of the devourer organisms. More crucially, we discovered that all devourer organisms share identical genetic markers. They're not a diverse species, they're clones. Billions upon billions of identical organisms with identical strengths and, more importantly, identical weaknesses. The implications struck Cathvar immediately. If they're truly identical, then any weapon that works against one should work against all of them. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Which brings us to our current tactical situation. Admiral, we've developed weapons specifically designed to exploit these biological vulnerabilities. Our quantum disruptors don't just destroy devourer vessels, they introduce genetic viruses that spread throughout their fleet networks. One properly placed shot can disable dozens of enemy ships as the virus propagates through their biochemical communication channels. She gestured to another officer, a woman with the call sign Reaper stitched onto her uniform. Colonel Martinez commands our Psycho Division. Colonel? Martinez stepped forward, her expression serious. Admirals, there's another aspect to the devourer threat that the galaxy hasn't fully understood. They're not just consuming matter, they're consuming consciousness itself. Every intelligent being they absorb adds to their collective awareness, making them smarter and more dangerous. But, she continued, this also creates an exploitable weakness. Human beings possess something that makes us particularly indigestible. Our individual consciousness is apparently too chaotic and unpredictable for their collective to properly absorb. When they try to consume human minds, it creates severe disruption in their neural networks. Charles Nex's antenna quivered with excitement. You're describing a form of cognitive warfare, using human consciousness as a weapon against their collective intelligence. More than that, Martinez replied, we've learned to weaponize human thought patterns. Our neural link technology doesn't just coordinate our fleets, it projects human cognitive patterns as a form of psychological jamming. When devourer organisms encounter human pattern thought broadcasts, they experience something analogous to severe mental illness. Chen moved to the central tactical display, bringing up a real-time view of local space. Admiral Cathvar, this brings us to our immediate strategic situation. Long-range reconnaissance has confirmed that the main devourer fleet is indeed moving toward the galactic core worlds. They have approximately 14,000 vessels, including their largest hive ships. 14,000, Cathvar repeated quietly. Even with your capabilities, Admiral, those numbers seem insurmountable. Under normal circumstances, you'd be correct. But we're not planning a normal engagement. Chen manipulated the display, showing projected fleet movements. Admiral, what I'm about to propose will require unprecedented coordination between our forces. We're going to split our attention across 3 simultaneous objectives. The tactical display shifted, showing 3 distinct operational theaters. First, a defensive force will remain here to protect the refugee fleets. This will consist primarily of your vessels supported by our 2nd and 5th fleets. Their job is to hold this position against any devourer forces that attempt to eliminate the refugees while we're engaged elsewhere. The display highlighted the 2nd theater. Second, a strike force will move immediately to the galactic core worlds. This will be our 1st, 3rd, and 7th fleets, along with your most mobile vessels. Our objective is to reach the core worlds before the devourer main force and prepare defensive positions around the key cultural and population centers. And the 3rd objective? Cathvar asked. Chen smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. The 3rd force will be moving directly into devourer-controlled space. Admiral, for 6 years we've been fighting a defensive war, always reacting to their moves. It's time to take the fight to them. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. No civilization in galactic history had ever seriously contemplated offensive operations in devourer space. Admiral, Dr. Vexnala said carefully, the devourers have converted hundreds of star systems into feeding grounds. The energy patterns alone would be lethal to most known life forms. Most known life forms, Chen agreed. But humans, it turns out, are remarkably adaptable. We've developed environmental suits and ship modifications that allow us to operate in devourer space. More than that, we've learned to turn their converted systems against them. Commander Jackson resumed the briefing. Admiral, devourer converted systems aren't just feeding grounds, they're nurseries. Those systems contain the larvae and juvenile forms that will become their next generation of war organisms. If we can destroy their breeding centers while their main force is attacking the galactic core, we can break their reproductive cycle. A 3-front war, Charles mused. The logistical challenges alone are considerable, Chen agreed. Which is why this operation will require something that's never been attempted before. Complete integration of human and galactic forces. Not just coordination, but actual fusion of command structures, tactical doctrines, and combat capabilities. She touched a control on her uniform, and suddenly every officer on the bridge could hear a soft harmonic resonance in their minds. What you're experiencing is the outer edge of our neural-linked network. It's completely voluntary, and it only provides tactical awareness, not access to personal thoughts or memories, but it will allow human and galactic commanders to coordinate their forces with unprecedented precision. Kethvar found the sensation strange but not unpleasant. He could sense the presence of other minds, human commanders throughout the fleet, all focused on the same tactical problems he was considering. The level of coordination it offered was beyond anything galactic military doctrine had ever envisioned. "Admiral," he said to Chen, "what you're proposing is not just militarily revolutionary, it's going to fundamentally change how galactic civilization approaches warfare." The cultural implications had eventually been significant, Chen acknowledged. "But Admiral, the alternative is extinction. And I should point out that our species has already faced this choice. When the Devourers first reached our space, we had the same concerns about preserving our individual nature versus accepting the modifications necessary for survival." "And you chose survival," Kethvar observed. "We chose evolution," Chen corrected. "Admiral, the Devourers represent more than just a military threat. They're a fundamental challenge to the continued existence of individual consciousness in our galaxy. The only way to defeat them is to become something new, not giving up what makes us unique, but finding ways to unite our uniqueness into something greater than the sum of its parts." She gestured toward the tactical display, where human and galactic fleet positions were beginning to merge into integrated formations. "What we're offering isn't just military alliance, it's transformation. When this war ends, neither humanity nor galactic civilization will be quite the same as when it began. But both will be stronger, wiser, and better prepared for whatever challenges the universe presents next." Lieutenant Commander Torres, Chen's communications officer, approached with evident urgency. "Admiral, we're receiving priority signals from our deep space reconnaissance networks. The Devourer advance toward the galactic core has accelerated. They've apparently detected some of our fleet movements and are moving to intercept before we can establish defensive positions." Chen nodded grimly. "Estimated time to contact with core world defenses? 73 hours assuming current velocities. And our transit time to intercept? 68 hours if we depart immediately with maximum velocity formations." Chen turned to Kethvar. "Admiral, I need your decision now. Are your forces prepared to integrate with ours for immediate departure? Once we begin this operation, there won't be opportunities to reconsider or modify our approach." Kethvar looked around the bridge at his officers, seeing determination replacing the fear that had dominated their expressions for so long. "Admiral Chen, the Zephyrian Defense Council accepts full integration with human forces. Our ships, our crews, and our strategic resources are at your disposal." "And the other refugee fleets?" Shalnek stepped forward. "Admiral, I've been in communication with the surviving fleet commanders throughout our discussion. The Etherian Synod, the Quantum Collective, the Nixari Shield Houses, and all the minor fleet elements have agreed to follow the Zephyrian Council's decision. We stand together." Chen extended her hand toward Kethvar, a human gesture he had learned about from their cultural briefings. He grasped it firmly with his own six-fingered hand, and the symbolic alliance between species became tangible. "Then it's settled," Chen said. "Admiral Kethvar, in 6 hours the largest combined fleet in galactic history will depart for the core worlds. Admiral Patterson will remain here with defensive forces to protect the refugees. Admiral Washington will lead the Deep Strike Force into Devourer space, and you and I will take the main force to save the heart of galactic civilization." "Admiral," Kethvar said as they released the handshake, "I have one final question. Your species has already won its war against the Devourers. You could have simply remained in your secured space and let the rest of the galaxy fall. Why risk everything to save civilizations you've never encountered?" Chen was quiet for a moment, looking out at the combined fleet formations on the tactical displays. "Admiral, when our philosophers first contemplated the existence of other intelligent species, they debated what our responsibilities would be if we ever encountered them. The conclusion they reached was simple. Intelligence is the universe's way of understanding itself. Consciousness is how matter learns to appreciate its own existence. Civilization is how individual minds create something greater than themselves." She turned to face him directly. "The Devourers represent the opposite of that, their entropy-given purpose, the universe's unconscious desire to return to simple, unchanging nothingness. When we fight them, we're not just defending ourselves, or even defending other species. We're defending the principle that consciousness has the right to exist, to grow, to reach for something better. And if we lose? Kethvar asked. Then we lose having fought for something worth fighting for, Chen replied. But Admiral, we're not going to lose. In 6 hours, the galaxy is going to see something it hasn't seen for 3,000 years, the Devourers in retreat. And when our species, all our species, emerge victorious from this conflict, we'll have proven that intelligence, creativity, and the refusal to accept defeat are more powerful than any force in the universe. As the two admirals began coordinating the details of the most ambitious military operation in galactic history throughout the combined fleet, beings from dozens of species prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of consciousness itself. For the first time since the war began, they prepared not just to fight and die, but to fight and win. The combined fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Zirion system like a tide of steel and determination. 3,000 vessels representing every major galactic civilization formed the largest military formation in recorded history, their hulls scarred from countless battles, but their weapons charged and ready for the fight that would determine everything. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the U.S. Unconquerable, watching the tactical displays update as sensor data streamed in from hundreds of reconnaissance drones. Beside her, Admiral Kethvar observed the same information through the neural link interface, his alien mind processing tactical implications with the same grim efficiency that had kept the galactic refugees alive through their desperate retreat. Sensor analysis complete, reported Commander Sato from the tactical station. Devourer main force consists of approximately 14,000 vessels arranged in their standard hive pattern formation. They're still 6 hours out from the inner system, but they've begun deployment of advanced biomines throughout the outer planetary orbits. Lieutenant Shao Nex, now serving as the Integrated Coalition's Chief Science Officer, manipulated her console to provide additional analysis. Admiral, the biomines aren't just obstacles, they're sensory organs for the main fleet. Every mine they deploy extends their awareness and coordination capabilities, which means, Chen said grimly, they know exactly what they're facing. 14,000 Devourer vessels against 3,000 coalition ships. On paper, it should be a massacre. On paper, Kethvar agreed. But we're no longer fighting a paper war, are we, Admiral? Chen smiled, and there was steel in the expression. No, we're not. Commander Jackson's status on the viral weapon deployment? All human vessels are equipped with Mark 7 quantum disruptors loaded with the latest generation of genetic viruses. Galactic Coalition vessels have been equipped with compatible systems, though their crews are still adapting to the targeting protocols. And our friends in the other theaters? Admiral Patterson reports successful defensive deployment around the refugee fleets. Admiral Washington's strike force has penetrated 47 light-years into Devourer space and located the primary breeding installations. Both forces are standing by for coordinated execution. Chen nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. Throughout 3,000 ships, crew members from dozens of species prepared to hear humanity's battle plan. All vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Chen. In approximately 5 hours, we will engage the largest Devourer force ever assembled. Many of you have never fought alongside human forces before. Some of you have never fought the Devourers with any real hope of victory. Today, that changes. She paused, allowing the neural link network to carry not just her words, but her absolute confidence to every mind connected to the system. For 6 years, humanity has been developing the weapons, tactics, and strategies necessary to defeat this enemy. For 3,000 years, galactic civilization has been learning hard lessons about courage, sacrifice, and the true value of the worlds we're defending. Today, we combine those advantages. The tactical display shifted to show the intricate formation patterns the combined fleet was assuming. Human vessels integrated with galactic ships in configurations that maximized both species' strengths while compensating for each other's limitations. The Devourers have never faced coordinated resistance from technologically advanced species working in true unity. They've consumed civilizations one at a time, overwhelming each with superior numbers and perfect coordination, but they've never encountered an enemy that could match their coordination while exceeding their adaptability. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. The Devourer advance forces had accelerated, their bioships moving in the flowing organic patterns that had terrified galactic civilizations for millennia. Admiral, reported the sensor operator, lead elements of the enemy formation will be in weapons range in 37 minutes. Human ships will form the primary engagement line. Galactic vessels will provide supporting fire and coordinate point defense systems. The combined fleet began moving into the complex three-dimensional formation that would have been possible without the Neuralink coordination system. Ships from dozens of different technological traditions moved with perfect synchronization, their diverse weapon systems creating overlapping fields of fire that could concentrate devastating power at any point in the enemy formation. Admiral Chen, Kethvar said quietly, "I've been reviewing the tactical data from your previous engagements with Devourer forces. Your victory ratios are impressive, but you've never faced numbers like this. Are you certain this strategy will succeed?" Chen turned to face her alien counterpart, and her expression was serious but untroubled. "Admiral, let me tell you about the Battle of Kepler 2438. 2 years ago, a single human battle group, 37 ships, faced a Devourer swarm of over 400 vessels. Not only did we win, we didn't lose a single ship. How? Because we stopped thinking like prey and started thinking like predators. Admiral, every tactical doctrine in galactic military history has been based on the assumption that the Devourers were a superior force that could only be temporarily delayed or avoided. We approached them as a problem to be solved rather than a fate to be endured. The Neuralink carried sudden activity as human tactical computers began coordinating with galactic sensor networks. What emerged was a level of situational awareness that no individual species had ever achieved. "Contact!" called out the tactical officer. "Devourer bioships are beginning active scanning of our formations. Admiral, they're hesitating. The lead elements have stopped their advance." Chen nodded grimly. "They're encountering something they've never seen before, an enemy that isn't afraid of them. Commander Martinez, initiate psychological warfare protocols." "Aye, Admiral." Beginning broadcast of human cognitive patterns on all frequencies. Throughout the Devourer formation, the perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable began to waver. Individual bioships started showing erratic movement patterns as their collective consciousness struggled to process the chaotic, unpredictable thought patterns being broadcast by human neural link networks. "Fascinating," Dr. Vexnaller observed. "Their formation integrity is degrading by approximately 3% per minute. Admiral, this is the first time in recorded history that anyone has observed Devourer forces displaying apparent confusion." "It gets better," Chen replied. "All vessels prepare to execute the Pandora Gambit." Kethvar had reviewed the tactical plan, but seeing it executed was still breathtaking. The combined fleet suddenly split into dozens of smaller formations, each moving in apparently random directions. To outside observers, it would have appeared that the coalition forces were fragmenting under pressure, but through the Neuralink network, every movement was perfectly coordinated. The smaller formations were drawing individual Devourer bioships away from the main swarm, isolating them for focused attacks while the enemy collective struggled to maintain coordination across an increasingly scattered battlefield. "First target acquired," reported Captain Vasquez from the Indomitable. "Initiating viral attack sequence B." The human ship's quantum disruptor fired, and the targeted Devourer vessel didn't just die, it began broadcasting the genetic virus throughout the biochemical communication network that linked the entire enemy fleet. Within minutes, dozens of Devourer ships were showing signs of cellular breakdown as the engineered virus spread through their shared consciousness. Multiple viral infections spreading throughout enemy formations, Jackson reported. Estimated degradation of enemy combat effectiveness at 17% and climbing, but the Devourers were adapting. The massive hive ships at the center of their formation began severing communication links with infected vessels, sacrificing individual bioships to prevent the virus from spreading further. "They're learning," Shalnex observed. "Admiral, they're beginning to isolate infected vessels. The viral spread is slowing." "Then it's time for Phase 2, Chen replied. "Admiral Washington, execute deep strike operations." Admiral Patterson, begin diversionary attacks on the refugee fleet perimeter. 57 light-years away, Admiral Washington's strike force materialized in the heart of Devourer space and began systematically destroying the breeding installations that were the source of their enemy's endless reinforcements. Simultaneously, Admiral Patterson's defensive force around the refugee fleets launched probing attacks that forced the Devourers to split their attention across multiple theaters. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers were fighting a truly multidimensional war against an enemy that could coordinate across interstellar distances with perfect precision. "Enemy main force is responding," reported the tactical officer. "They're moving to direct engagement posture. Admiral, they're no longer hesitating." "Neither are we," Chen replied. "All vessels, execute battle plan Omega. Show them what happens when the galaxy fights back." The combined fleet reformed into a single massive formation and charged directly at the heart of the Devourer swarm. It was a maneuver that violated every principle of galactic naval doctrine. No one attacked Devourer forces head-on and survived. But as the two formations closed to combat range, something unprecedented began happening. The human vessel's quantum disruptors weren't just destroying individual bioships, they were creating cascading failures in the organic networks that connected entire sections of the enemy fleet. Remarkable, breathed Dr. Parsonage. Fex Nala. Admiral, each quantum disruptor hit is creating neural feedback loops throughout their collective consciousness. They're not just losing ships, they're losing cognitive coherence. Kethvar watched in amazement as Devourer bioships began attacking each other, their shared consciousness fractured by the combination of genetic viruses and neural disruption. Admiral Chen, in 3,000 years of warfare, no galactic commander has ever seen Devourer forces display this level of tactical breakdown. Because no galactic commander has ever had the tools we're using, Chen replied. But Admiral, this is just the beginning. Commander Sato, execute final phase protocols. Throughout the combined fleet, human vessels began broadcasting something that made even their galactic allies pause in wonder. The neural link network was projecting not just coordinated tactical awareness, but something deeper. The collective hopes, dreams, and determination of every conscious being fighting for their right to exist. The effect on the Devourer collective was catastrophic. Bioships throughout their formation began shutting down as their shared consciousness was overwhelmed by the chaotic creativity and indomitable will of individual minds united in common purpose. Admiral, reported the communications officer, we're receiving surrender signals from Devourer vessels throughout the formation. They're actually withdrawing. The tactical display showed something that no galactic civilization had ever witnessed. Devourer forces in full retreat, their bioships fleeing back toward the galactic rim as their collective consciousness struggled to process its first encounter with a truly superior enemy. All vessels, pursue and destroy, Chen ordered. Don't let them regroup. Admiral Washington, continue operations against breeding installations. Admiral Patterson, maintain defensive positions around the refugee fleets. Over the next 6 hours, the combined fleet systematically hunted down and destroyed fleeing Devourer forces, while Admiral Washington's strike teams eliminated every breeding installation they could locate in Devourer-controlled space. When the battle finally ended, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Devourers had not just been stopped, they had been defeated so completely that their collective consciousness had fragmented and their surviving forces were fleeing toward extragalactic space. Final casualty report, Chen requested as the combined fleet regrouped around the liberated worlds of the Xerian system. Coalition losses, 43 vessels destroyed, 218 damaged but repairable. Estimated crew casualties, 12,000 across all species. And Devourer losses? Complete destruction of the primary assault force. Estimated total enemy casualties exceed 90% of engaged forces. Admiral Washington reports successful destruction of breeding installations across 47 star systems. Chen nodded and activated fleet-wide communications one final time. All vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Chen. Today, the galaxy fought back and won. The Devourer threat has not just been neutralized, it has been eliminated as an existential threat to galactic civilization. She paused, looking at Admiral Kethvar, whose expression showed wonder, relief, and something approaching joy. But more than that, today we proved something that will echo through history. When intelligent species choose to unite rather than compete, when they combine their strengths instead of exploiting each other's weaknesses, when they refuse to accept that extinction is inevitable, there is no force in the universe that can stand against them. Throughout the combined fleet, celebration began as beings from dozens of species realized that their long nightmare was finally over. The galactic core worlds were safe. The refugee populations would return to rebuild their civilizations, and the threat that had dominated galactic consciousness for 3,000 years had been broken forever. Admiral Kethvar activated his own communication system. Fleet Admiral Chen, on behalf of all free peoples of the galaxy, I offer humanity not just our gratitude, but our permanent alliance. What has been forged in this battle should never be broken. Agreed, Chen replied. Admiral, when historians write about these events, they won't just record a military victory. They'll record the day that galactic civilization grew up. The day we stopped seeing each other as competitors and started seeing ourselves as partners in the greatest adventure the universe has to offer. As the combined fleet began the journey home, carrying news of victory to worlds that had given up hope, humanity and galactic civilization began the process of building something new. Not just peace, but a true partnership between species that would ensure that no force like the Devourers could ever threaten conscious life again. The galaxy had learned that when intelligence fights with unity, creativity, and absolute determination, even extinction itself can be defeated. And that lesson would shape the future of every intelligent species for millennia to come. Aliens in Crisis discover humanity's Armada fighting beside them. HFY Sci-Fi Story.